This is Chris Spear, and you're listening to Chefs Without Restaurants, the show where I speak with culinary entrepreneurs and people working in the food and beverage industry outside of a traditional restaurant setting. This week, I'm talking to my friend Michael Twitty. He's a James Beard Award-winning culinary historian and the author of The Cooking Gene and Kosher Soul. His work explores the deep intersections of food, identity, culture, and history. I first had him on the show 4 years ago. Today, he's back on the show to talk about his newest book, Recipes from the American South, which is out now. This is a massive, sweeping collection of over 250 recipes that dives into the layered traditions of Southern cooking, from classics like fried chicken and cornbread to lesser-known dishes like Mississippi Chinese collards and possum and sweet potatoes. In our conversation, we talk about what it means to be Southern, how he approached writing a book this expansive, and the challenges and joys of preserving food culture in a time when so much is at risk. We also get into the personal stories, cookbook fatigue, and yes, some of my favorite items, both grits and scrapple. If you love food with a story, especially Southern food, you're going to want this book on your shelf. As always, thanks so much for listening, and have a great week. Hey, Michael, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much.
I got an advance on your cookbook, and this is the kind of food that I love to cook. So I want to talk all about this new cookbook you have coming out.
Absolutely.
So we've talked before, many of our listeners maybe have heard that, and we talked a lot about Jewish food, your background there, but clearly, obviously, Southern food, cooking, storytelling, heritage, and all that. But why this book that is exclusively about Southern food and cooking? Like, when did you start thinking about this being something you really wanted to take on?
Well, Emily Takutis, who is one of the managing editors of Fiden, hit me up and said, well, do you know anybody who would be willing to do our Southern cookbook? We're looking for, this, that, and the other. And I really sincerely did look for other people. But something, it's not easy to get people on board on a big project like this, unless there's some huge amount of money and they have so many resources. And so eventually I said, she said, I'm looking at somebody who can do this, and that's you. And part of the reason why I even said, okay, I'll do it. It does have a box. It does have walls and boundaries. Sometimes we think we have absolute, complete, I wouldn't say freedom, but leeway, then it's going to be great, right? No, if you have little boundaries, then it's easier to not go overboard. It's easier to be within a certain paradigm. And to be honest with you, my relationship to Southern food and the Southern food world has been inherently political. Just because I ask the questions, right? Questions like, where do we position this story in light of all of our cultural, sociopolitical elements? Where do we position this story in light of our tortured history with race? Where do we position this story in the light of, we still have groups within the family of Southern food who still have not obtained, self-actualization. If everybody's going, what is he talking about? Think about the Gullah Geechee community. Think about, celebrated culture and cuisine, but land loss, climate change, gentrification, blah, 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 right? And it's often not us. It's often not Black authors who are doing big Southern cookbooks. Now somebody's going to say, oh, well, that's not true. I said, I understand. Matthew Rayford has Breast and Yam. Ashley Shanti has Our South. Those cookbooks are great. Fantastic. Princess Pamela of late had her book. Miss Emily Meggett had her book. And I'm not denigrating them at all. But these are often books that focus on the author's personal experience and their locality and their search of their journey. This is a sweeping volume for Southern food, okay? And there are not a lot of, that I could name, Black authors, Black American authors, period, who have done this. And that's not a pat on my back. It's just a challenge to me. It was a serious challenge to me to work with a big publisher like this on a cookbook. I work with Harper on food memoir and writing. It's a challenge to me to how many copy edits go into a cookbook like this? A ton, right? So I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to learn. I wanted to grow. And I also wanted to leave a legacy, you know. So, well, not right now, but start building up my legacy.
Please don't go.
No, I ain't going nowhere. But building up my legacy through a new level of talking about food. You know, cookbooks are technical. Cookbooks are also informative. Cookbooks are also entertaining and aesthetically pleasing, and Five certainly knows how to do that. And so I really wanted to put my foot in the door with all those different elements.
Yeah, and I guess finding the balance of information, history, and head notes with it being a recipe-heavy cookbook, because you have books that are clearly books that you read. There might be a recipe,
Mm-hmm.
in there or two, but this is really like a cookbook. Is this your first cookbook that's like this with this many recipes? It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did rice for University of North Carolina Press, but rice, of course, is a part of a almost encyclopedic collection of recipes. And again, right, there are only, I think, two or three, maybe two, and I'm one of them, Black authors who contributed to that collection. And if you look at that collection, it's a who's who of who's been doing food writing in the South in the past 20 years. So again, it's like little breadcrumbs leading up to whatever.
So, what's the South? I live in Frederick, Maryland. I'm originally from Boston. When I was coming down here, I never would have thought of this being the South. And there's a lot of talk about, is Maryland the South? DC, is that at the South? We have a lot of
Absolutely.
Southern type restaurants, and you do touch on it in some of your recipes, like with crab cakes and such. But what do you consider the South, or where does it start, I guess?
Well, there's one of those old-timey Southern cookbooks from like the 1890s. And the person writing the cookbook was living in Washington, D.C., and every single meal. Actually, it's gorgeous because at the back of the cookbook, there is a meal for every single day of the year.
That's pretty intense.
Yeah, and it's seasonal, and it's like breakfast is this, lunch is this, dinner is this. I need people to understand something. Paul Fehrenbach, who owns Big Jones in Chicago? He is a Southerner. He is from Indiana, but he's a Southerner. In the sense of that his German Catholic ancestors settled into Southern Indiana, which, much like Southern Ohio and Southern Illinois, is part of the Southern cultural realm. I need people to understand something. The Confederacy is not the South. The South is not the Confederacy. And even where you live, I think it's Monocacy, they have a big Confederate cemetery over there. So people understand there's these lines that people create are completely arbitrary and nonsense. You cannot talk terrapin and fried chicken the way that Merlanders have done it in many different ways. Cream gravy on the side, cream gravy on the chicken, Old Bay in the batter. I mean, all that stuff. That is Southern. The fact that we have, God, Montgomery County, Maryland, was called 1940s the fried chicken capital of America. Okay?
I didn't know that.
The country ham that, Kentuckians and Tennesseans and other people lawed all the way over to Missouri. Who do you think brought that? People from Maryland who ran out of land because of tobacco, who went west. And that's where they ended up. If you look at these family history, people from Kentucky, parts of Tennessee, and definitely the southern Midwest into Missouri, it's us. It's Merlanders. And some people might say, well, why does he say that? Because I don't want to say Maryland, because if you're from Maryland, you ain't from Maryland. So there you go. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I've even had people from the Deep South go on social media and be like, Virginia is not the South. Where the hell was the capital of the Confederacy? Which state had more enslaved people than any other state? The Commonwealth of Virginia. Which state started the institution and started that patrician elite legacy that carries all the way to Texas? So, it's just like, but I think people's understanding of Southern is also kind of also racialized. And I think that's why I kind of brought up that topic of who's writing this book. Because Black Southerners are often cut out of the fullness of being Southern, even though we invented this ish. And that's what gets me every single time. We have to be a little bit more fluid, understand the importance of migration and movement. So, for example, some Texans are virulently against calling Texas the South. and some Texans absolutely affirm it. And what used to be a very kind of almost quaint cultural joning session has now become like real, you know, kind of dangerous cultural politics, right? Somebody living, say, for example, in Northern Ireland came over on a boat, ended up in Philadelphia. And then they were like, let's get on the Great Wagon Road. And they went down to Southern Appalachians. And then that person's descendants said, hey, you know what? I want to get away from it all. I'm going to go to the Ozarks, or I'm going to go to Tennessee. And then I'm going to end up from Tennessee and make my way down to Texas. And that was because the land was being opened up because of the expansion, westward expansion vis-a-vis Native American displacement. And that's the real history. It's not, being from Florida doesn't necessarily make you a Southerner. It's the culture, it's the ecosystems, it's the agriculture, it's all of the pieces, it's the settlement, all the pieces that are there above. And being Southerner does not mean being salt and pepper, black and white. We have Viet Cajun cuisine, we have Kurdish cuisine in Nashville, Tennessee. We have people who have, mixed Caribbean and Afro-Latin and Latin and Southern cultures in Florida. We have Menorcans in Florida. We have all the different cultures. We have German in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and Salem in North Carolina. And also the fact that we have these ethnic lines. So I'll give you one more piece. The ethnic lines are kind of important. I think people say a Mason-Dixon line, and then they don't believe it, or they say, well, the South begins at the Potomac, which is stupid, because the same exact economy and social factors that were going on across the Potomac and Virginia were happening at the same point in time in Maryland. There's no difference. I'm sorry, you're not gonna pop over the border and find the North.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. That's not how it works. And of course, people forget that in the past, people married across regions for economic, so a lot of New England married into the South.
Oh, I did. We joke about that all the time. My wife's from Virginia, and her dad always gives me a hard time,
Right.
jokingly, but yes.
But like in the past, like you did, that's why there's a Natchez, Mississippi, for example. The Union did not burn it down because guess what? Over half the money that was there was tied to their families in the Northeast and other
Mm.
places. Also, ethnic lines. A lot of times people talk about, and y'all don't be stealing this. I'm saying it official on this trademark podcast. People don't understand that German and Irish immigration were really important to this narrative. I often say that Baltimore, which is very German and Irish, among other things, is South by Mid-Atlantic. I often say that Louisville, which is very German and Irish, is South by Midwest, and so is St. Louis. Don't forget the French part there. And then you go down to Austin, very German, very Czech, other stuff, is very South by Southwest. So these fluid ethnic boundaries are important because the hearth culture of the South and a determinant of its hierarchies and systems of patriarchy, etc., is very English. And those groups had to make a decision. When the Germans and Irish went to Louisiana, for example, they actually melded in really good, really well, because it wasn't quite the same as the English system. And by the way, the early Irish and early Germans who went to Louisiana became Creoles. They changed their names or changed the way they sound their names so they could fit into that side. But it was that English plantation owner thing that also had some Caribbean elements as well in its historical origin. That either if you didn't want to get into it, then you remain separate. And it's those areas of the South, especially urban areas, especially towards the push towards the Civil War, where we find a difference in the culture. A last note, culinary. This makes the difference. This is why there is a brisket in Austin. This is why there is the hot brown other stuff in Kentucky. This is why there is a little bit difference in the food in St. Louis. This is why there is a little bit difference in food in Baltimore. There's definitely a lot of Southern, but there's some other angles as well. It's not Northern, it's German and Irish. And then, of course, after the German and Irish came, lots of Ashkenazi Jews came, lots of Poles, and lots of other people from Eastern Europe. But essentially, these people would raise children who would be raised in essentially segregated societies built on racial hierarchies from slavery, and would, go to school separate, use separate bathrooms, other things, but also develop those mentalities separate from that original landing. That's why I think it's so important to really understand the history, because the sort of like those little surface cues of what Southernness is very different from the deep, enduring elements of what Southernness is. Oh, shucks, we gonna get a Bucky's. That means we're Southern. Okay, whatever. Oh, shucks, you can get grits here. That's Southern. I remember a woman. I was in what I call the ghetto Ellis Island, the Richmond Greyhound station, and this woman got off the bus at 5 o'clock in the morning, and she said something that was very quaint. She was from New York, and she said, you know, she was at the god awful cafe they have there, and she says, "Oh, that's why I love coming back south. I can get grits." Like, baby, you can get grits in Harlem just fine. It's like Great
Uh,
Migration happened a long time ago.
yeah.
So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's an existential question. What is Southern? Are you Southern? Are we in the South?
No, it's great. I mean, it's obviously the most in-depth answer I've ever heard to that question, and yes, I appreciate that. And clearly, you have spent a lot of time learning about this and talking about this. So I figured you're the guy to ask. So I guess I still don't know what I am, having only lived here 17 years. I don't think I would say I was Southern at all, but it's starting to rub off on me.
Well, I mean, you also live in an area where it's the what was the folklore term? It's a cultural hinge.
Mm.
I would say that the northern Maryland border is the most southern part of Pennsylvania, and at
Oh
the
yeah,
same
yeah,
point in
yeah.
time, it's the most northern part of the South. And all those different pieces. We those of us who know the old line state understand that when you're in Garrett County and Washington County and whatnot, you're in Appalachia. There's no
That's
difference.
a good way to put that.
There's
Yeah.
no difference.
I haven't
I
heard that,
mean,
but
right? And then Eastern Shore is like a whole different state compared to
yeah.
the Western Shore, and it's not even the same place. And Baltimore and Washington are really strange, the strangest of cities in terms of the culture, because we're also international. We've always been international, and it also changes things, and it changes the way the food looks and smells. But dear brother, I have to say this: anyone who says I'm from the South, I'm from Atlanta, can just sit the hell down, because there's no Atlantans. I love you. I love Georgia. I love the Atlanta History Center most especially. But I'm gonna be real with you, Atlanta. If y'all don't shut up with this lamb chops, salmon hookah nonsense, and Hennessy on this and that, and blah blah blah, we gotta talk. Y'all are like the literal capital of the South, and the food there. I'm not trying to get in trouble, but I'm also just trying to say that the signature, as we move around a lot, as we have a lot of businesses that are chains, it's getting harder and harder to sort of like get the southern food. I don't mean authenticity. I mean the energy, the vibe that I document in this cookbook.
How do you approach authenticity? Because that's something I wanted to talk about. I think it's a
Yeah.
word that people don't like to use, or it's a loaded word. Like, what is authentic?
Authentic is what is real to you. I know that's like a sound of one hand clapping kind of answer, but someone says authentic Southern food, or something. What it works like this: you go to the comment section, someone demonstrating a recipe, and inevitably someone will say, "That's not how you do it. That's not that."
Every time.
Every single time, and the worst offenders are Louisianians. Of course, I'm sitting there going, "Well, there's this many variations," and they don't want to hear that. Or so, if I remember one time I did a episode with Hannah Hart on YouTube, big YouTube personality. And she made these historic recipes, and she flew me out to California to do this jambalaya. It was actually called jumberly, a Creole dish. It was not the jambalaya that Louisianians know. In fact, It was much closer to a chicken purloo.
Hmm.
The author was originally from South Carolina, Abby Fisher, but it was more like purloo. But she obviously saw the parallels between purloo and jambalaya, which is, they're both rice, and there's there might be some okra in there, some tomatoes, some onion, blah, blah, blah. And what's really cool about this recipe, y'all, is that the recipe had no water. It
Hmm.
relied on the juices of the chicken and the tomato. And I got to tell you, we need to cook more like that. That was great. Point being is that a lot of people from Louisiana were like, that ain't no damn jambalaya. That ain't da, 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 da. We said, no, I even said in the interview, this is, if you're looking for some K-Paul / Prudhomme / Justin Wilson / Giacomo's jambalaya, you ain't gonna find it here. This is an example of people understanding those parallels before we had digital media, before we had, print media most people could read. And so I get people's want and desire for authenticity. What they really want is nostalgia. They want a perfected nostalgia, because obviously, as we move ahead in time and we move ahead as human beings in our life journey, that first thing becomes canonized as the thing. If I asked you what pizza was, that's a loaded question, because it's going to be if you like those, most Americans like pizza. Let's be honest. But
Hmm.
we also know that for us, pizza has to be X, Y, and Z. And I think that oftentimes people, they want authenticity. They really want nostalgia.
Yeah, like pizza, they're going to think like that, probably New York style. We're not going to go into Detroit now. And there's the whole
Correct.
debate about, is Chicago even pizza, because it doesn't resemble like a traditional New York style slice.
For most of us, we had that thin slice pizza, New York-ish style. And that was that. And I mean, it goes for any other food in the world. I mean, I have a recipe in the Fighting book for Mississippi Chinese collard greens. And it's obviously based on bok choy with the oyster sauce and other elements. And I'm just like, this is totally authentic, because they were in the Mississippi Delta. They were no longer in China, but they weren't fully with 2 feet in America either. Not only because of the culture, but because of segregation. So if you understand all those pieces, authenticity is where you're at.
So how do you even start pulling together recipes? I don't want to call them the definitive, but if you're going to do a shrimp and grits or a hush puppies, how did you, for this book, decide on what those recipes looked like that you were going to select?
I'm glad you said shrimp and grits, because there's a couple different ways to do shrimp and grits. One is like the really sort of like gritty way, where it's like, once again, we got the red and the yellow and the brown. And mine is very white in the cookbook. And I said, maybe I should have done a variation on this recipe, because I do have a lot of variations in some recipes in the book. But, at some point you get cookbook fatigue writing a cookbook, because, everything that you write, you're going to have to back up.
Hmm.
Not in terms of, and especially in terms of the steps and the technique and the amount. And you're just like, okay, you know what? I'm done. Moving on, next thing. And if I could go back, I really would throw in a variation on that recipe. Now, all the recipes actually are based on several different recipes kind of pushed together. Like, what did I think was the elements that someone needed to know? Remember, this cookbook is not just for North Americans, it's for Europeans too, who, are English readers. And so there's that. And so people from all over Europe, people from all over North America and Australia will have this book in their hands and attempt to do their version of Southern food. And sometimes some of the ingredients, some of the things just aren't able to be found there. And I'm okay with that. The point of you and I both know there's cookbooks where we encounter things we can't get our hands on easily, but we go, okay, one day I'm going to do that.
Which is interesting, because I think this might be the first or one of the first Feyden books I can cook from, because I have, like the Noma books, or like a book from Spain or somewhere. I've got the DOM book. They put out all these books from other
Right.
countries where you're like, where am I going to get crickets or reindeer penis or whatever it is? So I was finally excited to have one of their books where I'm like, I can literally make every single thing in this book.
I love it. I
And
love
I
it.
love them. I love them. They put out great books for sure, but they definitely also deal in the high end, kind of like upper echelon Michelin type restaurants where the recipes are crazy and I'm just reading them and I'm not making anything from them.
Right. It's a record. It's a record of It's culinary graffiti in a way. I was here. We were here. WUZ was. So some of the recipes are obviously classics you gotta have: fried chicken, black eyed peas, cornbreads of different types, biscuits different types, collard greens, blah blah blah. Okay, great. And then the recipes that are just like historic, like ash cakes. Yeah, you kind of gotta know. I want you to know that this is part of our story. And ladies and gentlemen, skillet cornbread, as wonderful as it is to some people, you know, I'll be real with you. I to this day, I will put some daggone Jiffy Mix in a cast iron skillet because that to me is the cornbread of the Great Migration industrialization. And yes, I will eat your cornbread if it's the real deal. But up in my house, this is what we're gonna do. Only because that is my nostalgia, it's my authenticity. But ash cakes remind you that there was a time when people ate hoe cakes, ash cakes. That was the predominant cornbread. It wasn't necessarily tasty. Beaten biscuits are in there. People think they're going to get this big, fluffy, homemade version of a Grand's biscuit, and they're not. They're going to get something that was basically the quick fire hardtack that made you feel full, and that you could easily take a piece of ham, for example, country ham, and cut a slice, put it between the two pieces of dough, and shove it in your mouth, and know that you ate something, and that kind of thing. Possum and sweet potatoes. I actually find possums to be extremely cute and fun and interesting. And I've more than once have I has a dog of mine found a possum playing dead in the backyard, and I take the dog away, and the poor little possum, I give it put up in a tree, and it says, "Hey, okay, thank you very much, I'm out." But I put that in there because for a generation of Southerners, game. I think there's this myth going around that Southerners only ate game and certain types of fish because they had to. That's not true. They ate them because they wanted to. My one of my favorite stories, but it was one of those 19th century architects, and he walks by the James River, and he sees an elderly black man fishing. This is before freedom, and he uses the racial term uncle. He says, "Uncle, what are you catching?" "Shad." And he's very self assured that he's right. And the elderly black man says, "Oh, no, sir. I wouldn't feed shad to a whore's dog." Well, that tells you right then and there
Yeah.
that not everybody loved everything or just got by. No, 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 no. We're not that kind of people. I think both of us probably have seen those beautiful or have those beautiful Time Life Foods of the World books.
Yes, I have a few.
Extraordinary. By the way, if you want more than a few, you want the whole set, there's a free bookstore in Baltimore that always has them. You could just
Oh.
put them in your bag and go. Yeah, it's a free bookstore. It's because they take the antique books and sell them, and that supports the rest of the store just being a dumping ground for National Geographics and Time Life books. But I'm telling you, I saw them, and Peter Friedman does a beautiful Creole and Acadian cookbook. I've given them away to people because they'll find extra copies somewhere. It's so gorgeous and it's so pretty. And of course, that in a Southern style, Eugene Walter. I mean, those two books shaped a lot of what I know. In addition to like watching Natalie Dupree as a child, may she rest in peace. It still messes me up that I've stayed in this woman's house eating her cooking. Wild, wild as an
Mm,
adult, you
yeah.
know? But I guess what I'm trying to say is there was like this recipe for like these crab chops for Lent. And although I think if I had been in the photography room when they were doing all these lovely pictures of my book, my recipes from my book, I would tell them, don't forget the claw. I really want the claw. Because in the picture in the Time Life book, the crab chop, instead of a bone, has a crab claw attached to it. And then there was a recipe for oreille de cochon, which is a pig's ears. It's not really pig's ears. It's a quick fried pastry where you dump a bunch of cane syrup on it, and then you immediately throw in pecans. I can't even eat pecans, but it sounds delicious, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted recipes like that were a little bit that were not just nostalgia, but reminded people fritters are Southern, chops and smothered and good, stuff for certain religious seasons are Southern. And so there's this mythology that Creole and Cajun cooking is actually not the same. And I'm sorry, but it totally is. It's in the same framework because there is no French influenced cuisine on the planet like what's coming out of Louisiana, and for obvious reasons. And last but not least, we have recipes that show, like I talked about the collard greens from Mississippi, from the Chinese community. Sandra Gutierrez let me adapt 2 or 3 recipes, like with collard green empanadas and the chorizo dirty rice, to show that the South is not just the Sephardic pink rice in there. It's not just the recipes that we think we know. And I wish I had been able to do it via Cajun recipe in there. I mentioned them community several times in the book, but I wasn't able to get to everything. Ideally, I wanted to have West African, Cuban, Puerto Rican, via Cajun, Middle Eastern, Kurdish. But honestly, again, you get cookbook fatigue.
Yeah, it would be a 500-page book.
Yes, and you're just like, all right, I think I'm done now, or at least, or I'm not so confident that this has all the pieces, and I'm going to have to do weeks worth of research to make sure these recipes go in this book and aren't cause for disrespect or argument. I mean, I can handle controversy. What I can't handle is disrespecting somebody's culture.
Yeah. But I'm sure this will still open up comments about specific recipes and going back and forth. So I want to know, your shrimp, going back to the shrimp and grits recipe, it's water, salt, and pepper. What are your thoughts on cooking grits? Because there's all manner of stock, milk, cream, butter. I've never put sugar in my grits. I know that's a thing. I've never even considered it. But like, is for you personally, is it always water, or are there different reasons, like, and how you're going to serve it, what you're using for your liquid?
To be honest with you, the only time I have done grits, growing up, I was not, I saw them on the table all the time. But it was a certain generation. It was my grandmother's generation from Alabama. My Virginia grandmother did not have grits. There was either hominy, which, ladies and gentlemen, hominy grits and hominy are 2 completely different foods. And what we call hominy grits are ceremonial grits. They're not the real deal hominy grits from back in the day where the hominy was dried and broken down. Whole different ballgame. So no, my grandfather from South Carolina, definitely grits. So there's a lower South, deep South quality here. I think people need to understand that Virginians had corn mush, they had beaten biscuits, they had hoe cakes, they had hominy, and fried apples and herring. Okay, that's very, Maryland is very similar. Very similar.
I'm laughing because my in-laws live with us, and my father-in-law, who's 84, that's like all of their food. Like, he's like rice, black-eyed pea, stewed tomatoes for dinner. He eats all of the tinned fish. He loves the little bony fish. We have like stewed apples as like a side dish to go with dinner, which is weird to me. I'm like, I'm having like meatloaf, but then we just have like a bowl of like sweet cinnamon apples on the table.
That's right.
So I have a lot of this, and he doesn't cook as much anymore. So my wife has taken over doing that. So we have a lot of these types of dishes. So many of them unfamiliar to me. The first time that we just had rice, black-eyed peas, and tomatoes for dinner, I was like, this is dinner? Like there wasn't even any meat in the beans. I'm just like, beans over rice with tomatoes? I was like 30 the first time I had that.
Wow. And you brought up a very good point in the sense of the black-eyed pea. See, people understand black-eyed peas are definitely an old part of Virginia food, and also black-eyed pea cakes. All that. I'm not sure I got to that in the cookbook because it's not as easy as it's first of all, akara from West Africa aren't easy to make unless you're skilled at it. Okay, you got to remove the hull from each pea. But then
sounds tedious.
Yes, but then black-eyed pea cakes can be a real mess real quick if you don't know what you're doing over here. I don't want to put out a recipe for anything that I can't conceivably make. And that, to me, I can make them, but I can't tell you, you know what I'm saying? I can't tell you how to do it. But to your question, like, grits to me is with like Boursin cheese or something like that. It's not even cheesy and yellow. It's like the garlic cheese or something like that. And then you have that with something. I don't make grits at all. I don't even have grits in my house, to be honest with you. I may have them in the back of the pantry. But that's another thing to realize.
You're being outed here, man, because I would have totally
I
expected you
am,
to
I
have
am.
have grits on the table.
But I'm just like, but I'm just it's like it's not like my favorite thing.
My mom went to boarding school in Massachusetts
Oh
years
wow.
ago, and I guess that's where we're from. They had grits every day, but she talked about hominy grits, and she even had this like ditty. It was like grits, grits, hominy grits. Like I don't know if that was a marketing campaign, but she said she
Mm.
hated them so much. I was not allowed. Like we never had grits in the house, but I think it wasn't like the traditional corn grits she didn't like. I think it was the hominy. So I just grew up never having hominy and never having grits until again, like I met my wife when I was in my 20s. But that's what I love is traveling around this country, getting to try all these different foods and things I've never had.
Now you notice there's no scrapple in this book.
Are you a fan?
I hate it.
Oh.
I literally I can't stand it. It's not like, no offense to anybody else, but I really have to say that I didn't grow up eating funky food.
Now, what if you had it without the organs in it? Because there are recipes where it's just like a braised pork shoulder. Is that something that would be interesting to you if you took it?
No,
No,
the pork
no.
part.
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess you could like. There's probably like a turkey variation or a beef one, maybe. But I
I'm
guess,
sure there's like, I
yeah.
mean, there's halal haggis, so there has to be something
Ugh,
like that.
that sounds so weird.
Yeah, I didn't grow up eating the funkier elements of Southern food, or even the more homely like butter beans. Like my grandmother ate that. It really was a generational thing, and I have to say that I'm really no different from other people. I know Southern people who won't touch a rabbit because they had
Mhm.
it so much growing up.
Well, I think a lot of those things that were maybe like considered poor foods. I mean, we had friends at home growing up who ground beef was really inexpensive at the time. And he just said as an adult, he was never going to eat ground beef just
Right.
because like that's what they had all the time. So the idea of having a hamburger or like a meat lasagna, he's just like, no, I'm not
Nah,
eating hamburger.
I don't blame them. Once you've had something too much, you just don't desire it anymore. But you know something is, there's a lot of Southern foods that en masse. I will some weird stuff. So for example, there are fruits, ogeechee limes, and other things that are they're not easy to source. The land has been denuded of some of these wild trees, plucked out because they're not fruit trees in particular are just, it's just damning because the trees often, the animals and the wind spread them all over. It's a mess on the ground. People don't know how to respect the fact that that's part of nature. And so a lot of beautiful persimmon trees get mowed down. Wild persimmon trees. There was one in not far from one of the synagogues I taught at in Maryland that was the biggest, beautiful tree, and it had these huge persimmons. Wild persimmons never get that big, and they cut the tree down, and all of it. It's like, damn, I can't go there anymore and get the fruit.
What do you think about pawpaws?
Oh, I wish nobody said a word about pawpaws, because now everybody, as soon as you see a pawpaw tree, you bet you believe that somebody's already got their eye on that fruit ripening. Before you can come back and get it, they've already got it.
I have my spot. There's a spot actually in Frederick along the Monocacy River. And if you know where to go, I can pull easily like 50 pounds if the day is right.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's a thing, right? It's just like there are a lot of foods that people used to eat or things people used to eat. Somebody obviously loved at some point Congo eel, which is not a eel, nor does it come from the Congo. It's actually, what do they call it? Lesser siren. It's an amphiuma. It's a salamander.
Oh.
People used to eat that, just like people used to eat cochineal, which is not really southern, but I mean, it's point being. You know what cochineal is?
No.
It's not as gay as it sounds. Listen, and I say that as a proud gay man. It's a 17th century English drink that somebody in the South probably, it's basically chicken broth with liquor. And
Oh,
so it's
that's
called
weird.
cochineal.
Oh,
Yes.
no. I don't know anything
Samuel,
about that.
yeah, Samuel Pepys would go to his favorite pub and meet his buddy, and he'd have cochineal. You took a boiled rooster and you mix the broth, the strained broth, with different kinds of alcohol and fruit and things, and drink that. Yeah.
You must be hard up for food and drink because I don't know.
I mean, you're in London, you have all the food in the world even at that time that you would want. But I guess what I'm trying to say in all of this is that from forage food to wild foods to certain types of fish and aquatic life to heritage breed livestock, to things in combinations, who eats black eyed pea cakes anymore? Right? And they were being eaten and celebrated in the WPA interviews about Virginia. Oh my God, think about it this way. In 5 years, 1930 will be 100 years ago. 1930 was, we still saw coins in our houses from 1930. We still saw movies and all of that, So it's wild to think about that in terms of culture, but think about it in terms of food. That's
Yeah.
100 years from ago.
Shh. That's because you and I are getting old.
It is. That's true. I mean, I'd rather be here than the other side at the moment. But I mean, the other part of it is just like it comes as a great shock to the human being, especially the American, that time moves on, and that 1800 when I was a little boy was not quite as far away as it is now. I'm gonna go back a little bit because this popped in my head, and I have to tell you this like right now because ADHD works that way. And it's a story from Montgomery County, Maryland. I did this whole thing on Montgomery County historical food a long time ago. And it was a woman, and she was on the southern side, and these Union soldiers came through Montgomery County, and you know something? The woman obliged them. She didn't like them, but she obliged them. And she says to those Union soldiers, you know, I think you all need some of our good Southern cornbread. So her identity was very much in that space. And I mean, if you ask somebody now living in Rockville or Potomac, they got a kind of vibe with that. They probably say no. Doesn't change the fact that in that time, that was the prevailing culture.
Yeah, when you're living in a $3 million house in Potomac, you're probably not identifying that way.
Correct.
I have a couple, before it slips my mind, I had a couple very specific food questions because, again, like not being from here, I've spent a lot of time trying to get to the bottom of some of these recipes. And one of the things that really struck me was Maryland crab soup, because I've always seen it with basically like the bagged frozen veg mix that has like corn, carrots, big, huge ass green beans, sometimes like hanging out of the bowl. Yours has none of that. And it has okra, which I've never seen in it. And I've never made it remotely close to the way you do it. So is that something that you consider to be closer towards the more traditional way? And have I just been seeing it? And I've just been seeing it this way for the past 18 years that I've lived down here?
It's all over the historic cookbooks. Even when James Michener, the famous historical novelist of late, wrote Chesapeake, he actually does a couple of food scenes in the book. And one is where he talks about Black ladies in the Eastern Shore of Maryland making okra soup. And so okra soup, crab, it's a handy combination. And it's documented and it's there and it's present. And it's all over these like Maryland and Virginia cookbooks, 50 years in the Maryland kitchen. Elizabeth Ellicott Lee doesn't have crab, but she has chicken in hers or beef. Of course, she wasn't living anywhere near the bay. But I mean, yeah, it's present. It's a real deal. And it's not, people came up with a cheaper, weirder version, but it's definitely a soup that's from the season, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely an July, August soup. And that's another thing I can't stress enough is that seasonality is really important here. I am with every Southern cook who says, I'm not doing a peach cobbler in the winter. I don't care if I can use the canned stuff or frozen peaches or jarred peaches. No, peach cobbler is for July, August, September. And then October, November, December, January is apple. Right? And then, you get what I'm saying. It's just
But
like.
then what gets really hard is even within that, the way that, I don't know if it's the weather or whatever, you don't even know when those are going to hit. And I feel like you have such a small window. Like, to my point, I work as a personal chef and I propose menus to people sometimes months in advance.
Yeah.
And they're like having a dinner the third week of July, like, I don't know if I can even propose a peach cobbler because, like, what are peaches going to be like? If it's
Right.
February, I don't know. So, unless they're really open to me saying it'll be some kind of fruit cobbler and we'll see what's good, but it's really hard for me to say. So, a lot of my menu items now are kind of like stone fruit, like a salad with stone fruit. And I know I'll have something, but I can't guarantee
Right.
that it's going to be peaches because I like seasonal cooking. But on this kind of end of catering personal chef things, you're getting people who are specking out. They want to see a menu like months to maybe even a year in advance. And it's really hard to target super seasonal cooking when you're doing that.
Never in my life did my late mother, blessed memory, ever consider using canned peaches for anything requiring peaches. Ever. And not even buying peaches from somebody else. They had to be made by us, processed by us.
So she wouldn't even like put them up, like can and jar them and then use them and make a peach cobbler in December, even if they were fresh in season peaches that you guys put up?
For the most part, no. There were examples. I mean, we'd also use the peaches every other conceivable way. But there were, I mean, my mom definitely would say, for example, somebody really wanted to have something like that. She might make that later on in the year, but for the most part, we made a ton of peach cobbler and a ton of peach crisp. I love crisp. And by the way, I for that reason, my mom took out the oats. Made it too healthy for me, I guess. But that's one of my favorite things, a
Mhm.
good peach crisp. Oh my God. Peach cobbler I love too, but not as much as peach crisp. I mean, the streusel topping and just put it in there with good fresh southern peaches in August. Oh my Lord. And it can't be them white peaches neither. They gotta be the yellow and little one, the blush
The
on them.
really drippy ones, right?
Yes, the
Yeah.
really drippy ones that you can, the juice comes out of them and you already know.
Man, I wish I had one of those like in the skillet right now waiting for me when I get off this
Heard.
conversation, but I don't, unfortunately. Well, listen, I feel like we could talk about the book a whole lot, but before we get out of here today, I want to leave a little time for, is there anything that you want to talk about besides this? Because right now there's a lot of weird stuff going on, a lot of talk about food and kitchens and cancel
Yeah.
culture and identity and politics and all that. But like, where are you at with things right now? I know you're very vocal online, especially on
Yes.
social media. So what's on your mind these days?
I just want people to understand something, that it's not, you don't feel it right now, but there are costs to enforced amnesia. There are costs to us simply not having all the pieces and the keys and parts of the story. There are code words being used, woke, DEI, critical race theory, etc. And these are, something, or I remember back in the day, it was, they're talking about Obama's former pastor and, you know, liberation theology. I'm like, did you know about this? As liberation theology, critical race theory, and intersectional, all these other terms are actually almost as old as us. They're not brand new. And they're being also used to sort of frame how people think about other parts of our culture. So, if you go down to a National Park Service run site in, say, for example, Charleston, which is dripping with history of enslavement and resistance, and they don't want to sell books about enslavement, what does that do for the cooking gene?
Mhm.
I didn't write the cooking gene to make white people feel guilty. I wrote the cooking gene to give us back our roots, and also to have every American consider that serious blood was shed so they could enjoy the life that they live, especially food. But what happens to me and other people like me when our books are ripped out, God forbid, from these gift shops where they
Is that
naturally
happening?
live?
Like, are your books being taken out of places like
I
that?
gotta hope not.
Yeah.
I really hope not. And I don't want to, but that means I've got to advocate. And people, it's funny. People don't always like people like me to advocate for our stuff. It's supposed to be like, if you do, then you're accused of being manipulative or whatever. But I don't see other people who are selling their whatever. They're not ashamed of their grift. There's people get paid a lot of money in this country to call me the N-word. They get paid a lot of money. But when we start saying this is important, this is valuable because of representation, we call woke.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, Rush Limbaugh went to his grave a multi-millionaire because he couldn't he couldn't keep the names of black people out his mouth. And so when it comes to the food world and food work, I noticed that the SFA just recently had a put out their conference symposium for October, and there were no black people on the schedule.
How's that even happen?
Well, I you have to ask
Yeah.
these folks and ask them, but also just like when I said the words that there were, maybe 10, 20 of us and crowds of hundreds, even though, Adrian Miller and Tony Tutin Martin and Jessica Harris have been involved in, leadership and planning and other those elements of these organizations, that, it's not transferring to the next couple generations. And now that I see people going woke is out, I'm like, you damn well know that the sort of like urge to include and have representation and show intersectionality, etc., is not brand new. It's not even civil rights. It's our entire history as Americans. And we're impossible. I want people to understand this. We are an impossible people without our diversity. There's no such thing as I can do this without you or you without me. The creative fire and imagination and cultural and culinary possibility that is here cannot be done artificially. You cannot remove people who are the stewards of a 10,000-year-old cuisine and call you and then go back to Taco Bell and Chipotle and think you're doing something. You know what I'm saying? So it's across the board.
Yeah, how do you love the food and the culture and all the things without the people, right?
That's
Like
right. That's
it's
the
like you
bottom
like you
question.
like you like rap music, but you don't like black people. You like going to Mexican restaurants, but you don't want Mexican immigrants here, all that stuff. Like you can't have one without the people.
No, and you can't you know teach your children how to appreciate other people. On a last note, we have this this village of on whites only village they're trying to develop.
Mm-mm.
Some you can go ahead and do that. Do what you want. But if I see one single black eyed pea, if I see one single bit of rice and collard and one single watermelon in that piece,
So what's the food? What are they going to eat at this whites only
I
place?
guess mayonnaise. I guess that they're highly limited oatmeal. I guess I don't know. But I mean, I have to say, stop. If you really want to do this, baby, do it. Go back to an English that has no Latin roots, and then go
Yeah.
on from there. Any borrowed word with the language that borrows the most words for other languages on the
Yeah.
planet.
I joked about this online last week because I have when my customers reach out to me, I ask them what they like, and I recently had someone tell me they didn't like, and I'm using air quotes here, ethnic food. Like, what does that even mean? So I asked people on Threads what you would serve them, and the responses were just off the wall ridiculous. Because, like, seriously, what does that mean? I don't like ethnic food. I think that means they want like Eurocentric, Italian, French type things, but they don't want to see like a Vietnamese or something. I don't know.
Forget the fact that for generations Italian was extremely ethnic
Correct.
to WASP Americans, and okay, so that's the answer to your question. That's what I'm worried about. I mean, first of all, I didn't get to almost 50 for this nonsense. Second of all, if we mess this up, and I don't even want to use the word mess, you know the word I want to use,
Mhm.
we will be forfeiting all the wisdom of 400 years. It'll go out the window. And with that wisdom goes knowledge. And with that knowledge goes experience. And for us to reinvent the wheel at this stage in our story, as we become basically the equivalent in terms of history of barely leaving college, it would be such a tremendous disaster for not just for our food, but for our national intellect.
Mhm.
And I'm doing everything I can with food to make sure that they don't win.
Thank you so much for your work. Like, it's so
Thank you.
important. I mean, I really, truly appreciate it. I think it's so thoughtful. You clearly know what you're talking about. I can tell you've spent essentially your whole life kind of digging into this, and it really shows. And I think it's important, and I do think there are intelligent people out there who want to learn. I think having collections of books and people who they can look to like you is really important. I mean, unfortunately, in a world of like snippet videos on social media, more people are going to that than really diving into history and stuff. But I do think there's a lot of people who are still really interested in this and see how important it is. And hopefully your works are going to be a lasting legacy. Again, don't want to see you gone. You're not even 50 yet, but I do think these are books that are going to last for, hopefully the test of time.
It takes a lot. The legacy question is something that is a tough one because it's just like it takes a longer time than one thinks. And what I really mean is this. Okay, so let's be honest with each other. What I really mean is this. Legacy while I can see it. You know?
Hmm.
I remember handing my grandfather the cooking gene and the immense pride at 90 some years old. And my grandfather said, "That's it, boy. You got one for the Twitties." And he clapped his hand and he smiled. He was so I'm so happy that I got to see one of my forebears look at that book and also see himself in the pages of that book and go, wow. When I say that my granddaddy picked cotton, I mean it. When I say that my grandfather, was one of the founding members of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, when I say that, he brought my father and many other children into this world with a pride in the land and a pride in where we come from and who we are. And I know my granddaddy's pecan trees, his peach trees, his field, his land, where he's buried, his father's buried, and his daddy's buried. And I did the work so I could trace my ancestry back to a man who was enslaved, was brought from Ghana to Charleston, South Carolina. And I hope people appreciate the providence of the book being in the hands of someone like me. But I guess the last words here are that, you're looking at somebody who's 48 years old, who, this is not easy, y'all. This is not easy. And when we talk about being marginalized, it really ain't easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And I've been to England a number of times. And also I've been to Scotland. I've been to Ireland. I've been outside of London, Kent, Somerset, Cambridge, Oxford, Yorkshire, Liverpool. I've been to Ireland. I've been to Scandinavia. I've been to Italy. I've been to all over France. And I've been to Africa 8, 9 times now. And I've traveled the entire South. I think the only state I haven't been to is Oklahoma. Some of you are like, Oklahoma's not the South. Yeah, sort of is. But everywhere else I've been, and I've, Southern Discomfort too. You remember that? Just crossing the entire South. I have done the damn work. That's the first and last word on this book, and everything else I do. I did the damn work without any money. Southern Discomfort Tour, I only asked for $8,000, and I should have asked for 10.
Huh.
$8,000
Huh.
to travel the entire South and do the work.
Michael, I can get $2,000 to go do a dinner one night for some people. Come on.
Well, look, you know what? If I got to come up to Frederick and we got to make this work, hey, you know what? We'll split that, boo. And I'll
Yeah.
build it up because I'm telling you, we are just, we have to support each other. That's the last word. We have to support each other. Those of us who are doing very similar work or in similar fields, we are not competitors. We are family. And that is the whole purpose of what we put on our tables to bring people together.
It's an amazing book. It's a truly amazing book. I haven't cooked anything from it yet, but I'm really going to crack into it and start cooking from it probably in the next week or so. I've been trying to read through it for research purposes, and I haven't had the opportunity to start cooking from it yet, but I look forward to doing that really soon.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show for a second time. I really loved having you here.
Thank you.
And to all of our listeners, this is Chris with Chefs Without Restaurants. Thanks so much and have a great week.